What you're hearing right now is one of the most significant pieces of recorded music, even though most people have never heard it. See, in 1948, Columbia Records first made one of these, the vinyl 12-inch long play record, and on this first pressing was what you're hearing right now, Mendelssohn's Violin Concerto in E minor. And with that, the music industry entered what we call the album era, over a half century defined by the purchasing of first vinyl, then cassettes, and then CDs. But I remember the day the album industry pretty much died. It was summer 1999, one of my buddies was like, hey, you gotta check out this new program, Napster, where you can get any music you want completely free. And little did I know that myself and millions of others downloading some terrible quality, mislabeled Limp Bizkit MP3 would lead to the collapse of this monolithic beast known as the music business. The music industry, as we knew it, is dead, and ultimately, that's a good thing. Let me ask you a question. What do Michael Jackson, Bon Jovi, and Miley Cyrus all have in common? Well, their music is among the vast ocean of music that legendary session guitarist Tim Pierce has played on. And unlike many of his peers, Tim Pierce has found a way to thrive in this new musical landscape that we find ourselves in today. So who better to talk with about the death of the old and the birth of the new?
There were no computers, so everything was analog. So musicians had to play together and get it right all at once. And that was kind of the beauty of it. I mean, the new way is great. It's great to be able to work at a digital workstation and get everything done.
Yeah, I think one of the things now is you actually have to make an effort to get in the room with someone. I think a lot of times if you're working on something, there's no face-to-face interaction.
Yeah, and that has its benefits, but it also has its drawbacks.
And this is an interesting thing that I'm not sure I ever really thought about before. Face-to-face interaction is something so deeply intertwined with music. At its primal core, music is a community-driven art. It's meant to be danced with together, performed together, enjoyed together. Sure, it's great that I can record a complete song in my basement here and have it out tomorrow, but altering that DNA certainly has an impact. I mean, look no further than the fact that I no longer need to hire anyone else to complete something, and that completely upends the economy.
There was so much money in the system, and the record companies were spending the money that they were earning from their huge artists and putting it back into all these other artists. The last form of music that you actually had to pay for was the CD. It quickly became either free or almost free.
If we're talking about things that changed drastically, the end of people buying music.
Yeah, it took all the jobs away, basically. So it's easy to say, you know, there's great things about today, great things about the other era, but that is really the storm cloud that hangs over the new thing. The songwriter got paid much better.
Check out this graph that I found online. You can see that for the longest time, people were buying vinyls, cassettes, CDs, even digital downloads. However, you can see in 2005, the first streaming service comes about, and then by 2023, the vast majority of music is consumed through streaming. And as a guy whose income is deeply tied into a streaming service, I can tell you that trying to pay your bills purely through the revenue that streaming provides is nearly impossible. However, there is a creativity that's born out of necessity, and with that comes new things.
So let's say you're an introvert, and if you were talented, there were other people who could make it big for you. These days, you got to do it yourself. So it's a different kind of person that actually makes it these days in some ways.
Anybody who's doing that is not just a musician. I think before, you could be just a guitar player and have a modest life and be successful.
Now it's music and I tell everybody this, it's okay to do music and something else. It really is. And if that means you work at a job where you can only do music on evenings and weekends, that's okay, because that's kind of the way it has to be moving forward. If it means you can make it without signing that record deal that's not fair, that is a good thing.
And ain't that just a tale as old as time itself? Artist gets screwed by record company. And the advice you'll get so often now is don't sign that record deal, because for so many of us, you're just handing over a piece of the pie and getting nothing back that you couldn't do on your own. And in this modern era, the power of technology has freed the artist from needing a record label to create their art. And you gotta chalk that one up as a massive win. However, when you used to have this big machine, it did create a lot of work for a certain type of musician.
In the past, every day of work led to a bigger career. Like if you played on a Michael Jackson song, which I did, you mention it to a couple of people and it starts to spread out. So you end up with credits that people are talking about that get you more work. Today, what's great is that there's so many systems in place where you can do it on your own.
Yeah, I would agree. The control that you can have.
I call it permission. Nobody gives me permission to earn money or to make my art. And in the past, you had to get permission because a studio was too expensive. Somebody had to fund that. You know, you had to get permission, or somebody had to call you and invite you in and pay you to do the work.
Yeah, and you know what else is, I think, pretty cool about today is the fact that if you just do something that's really good, there's a way to find your audience, just you to them.
In the album era, everybody had a boss they had to run things through before they put their thing into the world. The artist you're working for, the producer, the record label, the executive, somewhere along the line, you had somebody that you were answering to. Whereas now, there exists the opportunity to have complete control of your ship, which can be scary, but it can also be pretty great.
And in the old days, if you had a record deal and you sold 100,000 copies, you might actually get dropped. But in this day, if you have 100,000 people who buy your art or your product,
You're doing exceptionally well.
because you don't have the overhead, you don't have the system that you have to feed.
There's this book, it's called 1,000 True Fans, and it's about a relatively new concept. If you can build an audience of 1,000 people who are willing to spend $100 on what you do yearly, then you can build a pretty decent living for yourself. And when I started on this whole YouTube path, that was my business plan. And having reached that goal, I'll tell you that it's hard to do it, but it's attainable. You no longer need to do huge numbers and earn massive amounts of money because there aren't a ton of hands reaching into the pot of gold. And this book is totally worth checking out. It's like $4 for the Kindle version right now. If you want to read it, I'll put a link to it in the description. And I should note that a big reason why Tim has had so much success in the second half of his career is because he runs an amazing masterclass over at his website. And the first 50 of you to use my link in the description will get over 30% off a yearly subscription. Here's what Tim has to say about it.
What I tried to do is build a giant kind of collection of videos and tutorials so that you really can't find where it ends. I have, I think, over 1,800 videos and 150 hours of lessons and content.
Yeah, it's incredible. I've spent some time actually going through it.
So a few months ago, I joined the masterclass because I watched this video where he was playing insane blues licks, and I was like, I need to learn from him. And episode 131, Modern Blues Lead and Rhythm, was perfect for what I was looking for. See, learning a lick from a song is one thing, but having the guy who played it talk you through it, explain what he was thinking, what he was feeling, why he made those note choices, where it came from, gives you such a deeper understanding. Tim's personality really comes through in these lessons. It's clearly a passion from him, and there's so much there that there's something for everyone. So be one of the first 50 to use my link in the description and get over 30% off. Anyways, let's get back to it. Now we got to talk about the endless scroll that is short form content. TikTok, Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts. I've posted a lot of it. I've consumed a lot of it. I'm as guilty as anyone. But you got to remember, this kind of thing is quite new, and I don't think we fully understand the impact that this has on how we enjoy other things.
It's addictive, and it takes you away from a lot of the really, really best things in life, which are things that happen very slowly.
And you work for it, and it's an acquired taste. And
yeah, like learning to play an instrument, learning to cook, having a relationship, watching a movie. These are all things that take time.
I'll give you a perfect example of this. I remember when I was 14, we were at my grandparents' house, and my dad dug out this record player and set it up, and then he put on this very record here. And I remember listening to Stairway to Heaven, and I think it was that moment that really solidified my path on this musician's journey. Here was this beautiful, elongated song that built into the most gratifying musical climax that I'd ever heard. And I'm not sure that I would have had that moment if consuming short form content was a regular part of my life back then.
When you have every song that's ever been recorded in front of you, if you don't like it in the first 15 seconds, you move on to the next thing. And I think that has a huge underlying impact on a lot of the music industry.
There's too much and it's too easy to access, so the value of it is sometimes less in your mind. Music was valuable because there was nothing competing with it. And it was this relatively new art form that was still really, really growing and expanding, and all this new stuff was happening. And maybe it was never meant to continuously expand. Maybe it was meant to level off at a certain point.
Well, it's like anything. Like, it's a really complicated topic, and there's a lot of gray area here. Flip that around, I can say it's actually incredible that we can listen to any music. I can go and find bands that are making music in this weird specific style, and since I can access anything, I can go find them and they can have a following that they never would have been able to develop before. And I think this is why it's great to have this conversation with you, is because you've seen both and you've had success in both.
You know, I keep coming back to what's better about today. If you didn't fit into that system, or maybe you couldn't speak the right way, you didn't look the right way, or you were somehow too quirky to fit in with everybody else, today you can do it on your own.
What you just heard is the result of a little experiment. I wanted to see how cheap I could record something for and still have it sound somewhat decent. And the price to own everything that I used in recording that is under $500. I made that in under an hour, and you're hearing it a couple of days later. Think about what it would have taken for me to show that piece of music to you back in the 70s. The home studio wasn't a thing, so I'm gonna need to go to a professional place. That's not gonna be cheap. I'll probably need a record label to fund it. I'm gonna need a record deal, and there's a whole lot of logistics in making that happen. And like, that's just recording the thing. Forget about getting the music heard by people.
There were 2 radio consultants that controlled all of the airplay on rock radio in the country, and you had to actually pay those people to get your record played. And they actually had interests in bands where they were making money in management from some of the bands, so they would favor certain bands and certain styles of music. That's like mafia kind of stuff. That's stuff you can't get around. You forget about how having gatekeepers and having this closed system creates a lot of unfairness.
Well, and I think that's like an interesting note, is that there were probably so many could have been greats that just never were able to get around that, no matter what they do, and they had all that it took to succeed. I think if you have those things now, you're going to be able to do something with it.
As we talk about this, I would say it is better today. It's just harder to make a living in the middle.
And you know what I think maybe exists now that didn't exist before? Is now there's creative ways to solve that problem.
And today, frankly, you have to be an artist and an entrepreneur. You kind of have to be driven in all of the areas.
Before you could be a piece of the puzzle, now the puzzle doesn't exist. Go make your own puzzle.
Yeah.
Some people will thrive in one of those. Some people will thrive in the other.
So in conclusion, I think that we're better off with what we have now than what we used to have, even if this new thing is still far from perfect. We have the ability to share our music instantly. We have the ability to directly support the artists that we love. We have the ability to create freely. And we also have this massive wealth of information at our fingertips. Sure, there will be some casualties. There will be some people who this doesn't work as well for. But you got to remember, this new thing is, in fact, new. We're still feeling the growing pains. And I like to be optimistic and imagine that eventually what we have now will be better for all of us than what we had before. Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Remember, the first 50 of you to use the link in the description for Tim's masterclass are going to get over 30% off. Again, I can't recommend it enough. It's a great resource for guitar players of all levels. And I'll also let you know that if you like any of the merch that I've worn pretty much forever, all the old stuff is coming out of the merch store. If you want to get the Transformer guitar playing samurai or anything else that we've got there, now is the time to get it. We're taking everything out and making room for a whole bunch of new things there. So you can check that out at shopsamuraiguitarist.com. I've got links for that in the description as well. Thank you all for watching, and thank you all for being involved in my path in the new musical landscape. I truly couldn't do this. I couldn't make these videos without you guys. So until next time, look after yourselves, look after each other, look after the planet. I'm Samurai Guitarist, and I'll see you again soon.